Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Millo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives and work of people in my network. I want to talk to these great leads about the books that have impacted the work, the business, the life that they're leading. All those lives, all those worlds intersect. So I want to know which ones contributed the most to their work or impacted them the most. And the three types of books that I cover are books that they're sharing with me that I've never read, books that we've both read specifically for the series or maybe before the series in our past lives. And then the third category is when I talk to authors and or publishers about the messages that they're trying to get about the book that they're putting out there. So my guest today is Kim Pita, and Kim is a mental health advocate and past board chair of Mental Health Connecticut. Kim founded and launched Love Your Mental Health LLC in 2021, where she helps people turn their fears of mental health into love through self-care. She serves as chair of the board of directors of Copper Beach Institute, a mindfulness center in West Hartford, Connecticut, as well as Framingham State College Alumni Association. Kim is certified in mental health first aid, life purpose and happiness coaching, mindfulness facilitation, and singing bowls level 1. In 2019, she published her memoir, Split Ends, A Tale of Two Crazy Sisters, and is currently working on several books, including 25 Ways to Love Your Mental Health. Kim and I cross paths in various conversations, discussions, groups in the Central Connecticut or central statewide community. I think through the pandemic, or note that through the pandemic with the virtual world, you were just able to attend different discussions, different groups, different events, and cross paths with somebody that you may not cross path with in your normal, everyday, non-pandemic life. So I saw the work that Kim was doing. I think I saw her speak at an event, reached out to her just to learn a bit more about her and invite her to join me on the podcast. We touch base, and I learned about her work. She learned about my work. And because mental health has come to the forefront uh, even more in the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic, I think she can provide some amazing insight. And I'm excited to see how we can tie in her work in mental health to the book that we're going to cover. And I'll let her get to the book that we are going to cover. So, Kim, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, John. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Now, Kim, who are you today? This is typically the question that I ask just to get a sense of the work that you're doing. I read your bio, but what is the work that you look like in your day to day? I know you wear many hats. I think the bio just kind of gave a sliver of the work that you do. What is it that you're up to these days?
Well, I've been busy building my Love Your Mental Health practice, if you will, and not only delivering workshops and events to those to help improve their self-care and get past their fears, but also determining how I can bring that Love Your Mental Health brand and concept to the world. And really getting people to change their perspectives from fear into love. And I think the challenge has been mental health has been an area for so many years that people didn't really want to talk about. And I think one of the blessings of COVID, if there are any, is that people now have recognized how important our mental health is. You know, COVID caused a lot of isolation, loneliness, really kind of getting in tune of why do I feel the way that I feel. And so now mental health is really kind of been on a springboard, if you will. I mean, you're seeing, the government now starting to put more money towards it. Schools are starting to focus in on it. And if we can really talk about mental health at a very early age, then people will have this foundational knowledge about why we need to focus on our mental health. And it's so easy for us to focus on our physical health, whether it's a stomach ache or we can't breathe, or or COVID, or we're not feeling well, but people haven't really focused on their mental health. And I think that when we realize that our bodies, we need to focus on both, we're going to be better humans ultimately. So that's what I'm really focusing in now, is how do I continue to grow that brand through motivational speaking, through creating a book, and through delivering more programs. And this is a perfect opportunity. I definitely want to do some more national podcasts to get out to the masses.
Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do with your clients in terms of life purpose work, happiness, mindfulness facilitation, Kim?
Yeah, that's been an area where, I think that, as you grow older, I'm 55 now, and so we build these great paths of experiences and wisdom that, over the years it grows with us, right? And we learn from our life experiences. And so, one of the areas I've been focusing in on in coaching is really helping people to find their purpose. What are we meant to do in this life? And I find that a lot of people are fearful. And I think that's where the book that we're going to talk about today is how do we get past that fear and really start to put our talents and our gifts out into the world. So it's looking at, what are our triggers? What are the things that we need to release? Who do we need to forgive? And a lot of times we need to forgive our own selves first before we can forgive anyone else. Um, the whole notion of solitude and self-care and mindfulness of, really mindfulness people think is just, a lot of people think it's just sitting in practice in silence. And it's so much more than that. It's about embracing a mindful life, whether it's being mindful when you're driving, when somebody cuts you off and you get angry, instead of channeling that anger, just let it go, let it flow, because the only person getting upset is you. That person that just cut you off has no idea that you're so upset, right? So even doing dishes, a lot of us can't stand doing dishes. But if you really pay attention to what you're doing, the smell, the texture, the feeling, the sounds. The other things I've been really connected to recently are my senses, and really kind of keying in on your five senses. And if you and if you concentrate on them, and you really realize, like, wow, there's just so much beauty around us. So yeah. So and I've been helping people in recovery, particularly those who have really been down and out and really need to figure out what's next in their life and how to get beyond that pain and that loss and whatever it is that they might be going through. Because many times when people are going through recovery, something bad has happened in their life, and so rather than feel guilty and be judgmental of yourself, learning how to realize that we're all human, we all are special, and we all can bring our talents to this world.
Yeah, I think that's work that's just it's amazing. I don't even think it's only that mental health is now at the forefront in terms of a discussion point. I think it's at the forefront as a practice, as a way of life. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not only, you can come forward. It's not as stigmatized as it used to be. You can talk about what you're experiencing. You can be open. You can trust, the greater community that people are being seen. It's not only that, but now it's kind of that health, like you said, not just the physical, but the mental, all the other components in our bodies that go into setting us up for a sound just mental state, one of just being at peace. So it's amazing where just a few years ago it was destigmatized, where you could talk a little bit more, but now it's kind of like it's. I think you're seeing more and more that everything we do is mindful, like you mentioned, about how it's going to affect us. The decisions that we make, how is that going to affect us? The people that we're hanging out with, how is that going to affect us? What we're forfeiting in our lives or what we're tolerating, how is that going to affect us? So it came to the forefront in reacting to it, but now we're able to be more proactive. We're reminded to be more proactive about the choices that we make. It's not just treatment, it's not just acknowledgement, it's those things and much more. It's amazing to watch and see.
Yeah, and what's been interesting too is there's still a big issue with access to care, right? And so a lot of people still, they can't hire a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So we have to learn to depend on ourselves, right? And so there's a lot of coping strategies. There's a lot of inner work that we can do individually that doesn't cost money, that really begins to help us recognize, well, how our upbringing, how did that affect us, and how did that influence us, and maybe it created some negativity that we need to kind of step back and look at, or maybe it's created some triggers that we need to be aware of, and then when those triggers happen, instead of spiraling down, which many of us do, recognizing that it's a trigger and then change that pattern of behavior. And so I think that there's just, there's hope. I think that there, if anything, there's hope that, more people that are talking about it, the more that it's integrated into our life, I think the better humans that we're going to be, not only for us, but for everybody that's around us.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, just in conversations, I hear more about people mentioning their therapist, where years ago somebody would have mentioned their therapist, and it would have been like some kind of red flag or seen as a red
Yeah,
flag. Now, honestly, somebody mentions it in conversation, and it doesn't, you don't skip a beat. It's just kind of like, it is what it is. It's something that I do to take care of my mind, to decompress, to have a sounding board. And it's amazing how often it comes up in conversations with friends. Um, yeah, and they just feel comfortable opening up that that's a part of their life.
right,
It's
right.
it's normalized. It's not seen as an exception, but it's just seen as a part of life. And there's just, I mean, for me, I can't speak for everybody, but there's just a better understanding of what it takes to make it through this thing we call life. It's very complicated. We live in very complicated times, and our bodies are very simple. We just want to, our bodies just need to survive and eat. And this
Yeah,
world around us is just so much more complicated than what we're programmed for. It makes sense that we would need something beyond that, because we don't have, where like in primitive times we had so much to worry about survival. Now, for the
yeah.
most part, most of those things are taken care of. You don't have to hunt your own food. You can go to the grocery store. You don't have to worry about building a shelter. Hopefully, you have a home that you can stay in. You don't have to worry about clothing. For the most part, people have. I don't want to assume everybody's in the same state of well-being. Of course not. But we don't have those primitive pressures. So our bodies are built for fighting, and it's just we I know for myself, it's almost like my mind is racing, because it has to solve something, or it has to. I
Mm.
don't know. I don't know how you would describe it, and I'm hoping you'll get into what your experience has been, what you've seen. But let me stop blabbing. Kim, how would you walk us through what led you up to this point? Just like the highlights, or the major stepping stones in your life, starting when you were a child. Like what did the first steps into your career, into becoming who you are, what did that look like then?
Well, first I wanted to be a vet early on, and then I realized I was allergic to animals. Although I do have two cats, and they may be running around at some point. And I help. I take a lot of allergy medicine, let's say, to have the two cats. But then I decided I really wanted to go into journalism. I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories. I love hearing what makes people tick, and I think that's why I love to read so much, and I love to dissect books, and so I decided to go into journalism, and that's what I studied. I studied media communications in Framingham with a journalism minor. And then when I got out of college, I went into the world of communication. I went into the world of journalism, which my first job in a local newspaper was like $16,000 a year. It was just like, oh my, like I don't even know how we could survive on that. It's crazy. And then I kind of realized, oh well, maybe I should get into communications and write. I was always a writer. I always wanted to write a book. It was always my goal was to write a book by the time I was 50. I published my first book when I was 49, and so I always was a overachiever even when I was a kid. And went into the communications world, ended up working in Congress, was a press secretary for Barbara Kennelly, who was a U.S. representative in the House, moved to Washington, did that whole thing, and then she came back and ran for governor. And then that's when I decided I didn't want to work for anyone else again. And so I opened up my own little ghostwriting business, and speech writing, and then evolved that. Ended up meeting my partner, who is now my ex partner, but we ended up starting an ad agency, and we grew that ad agency together for 17 years, and it really became everything could have wanted. I mean, we were working for the state of, we did work for the state of the Connecticut. We were the tourism agency. We did work for Aetna, United Health Group, Cigna. I mean, you name it, we were doing it. We were at the top of the world. And then in 2011, my sister died. And that changed everything for me. My sister had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizoaffective tendencies, and PTSD. And at that point, I realized that life was way too short. And I was busy running this agency. I had two young children, and I said, I need to stop. I need to take a break. And so that's when I decided to take a leave of absence, and then really tried to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life and how I could find my own happiness. And that's where, when the mental health component really started to grow. And it was almost like, after she passed away, I knew I needed to do something to help the voiceless. And so I left the agency, got divorced, cleaned my canvas, and started anew. And from that, did my own little marketing communications business on the side, and then really started to grow this whole mental health world. And that's when I became trained in it, became a student of it, got mental health first aid certified, got involved with Mental Health Connecticut. And I knew that, with this angel on my shoulder, my sister Kelly, that I could help others get through, some of their own challenges. And
Mhm.
so that's how I've got to where I am. So, Love Your Mental Health is a passion project, but it's really how I was able to take all my talents that I gained over the course of my lifetime and put them into something that was going to be very meaningful.
So does it make sense for you based on I'm always fascinated by the connection between who we are as children and what we end up doing. You sometimes you can trace it back to when you were a kid. Of course, I ended up doing this because this is how I was as a kid. Does it make sense for you looking back at yourself as a kid that this is what you're doing?
Well, first of all, we didn't talk about mental health back then, right? So it wasn't even something that was on our radar. But yeah, I think so. I think I
But I mean,
always,
even in general, helping people,
yeah,
storytelling, something to that effect. Not
yeah, that helping
specifically
people.
mental health, but
Yeah, like I've always been that kind of person of, how can I help today? What can I do? And actually my mother reminded me, when I was young, I would got involved with, Special Olympics, and I would, I always wanted to help people because I believe in people, because I believe that we all have strengths and inner capacity to do great things in this world. And I think I looked at, what my mom was doing and what my grandparents had done, and, how they were able to make a difference in life. I mean, my mother's always been involved with nonprofits and, always doing good things for her community. And yeah, so I think so. And the whole piece of writing a book was definitely something that I had always dreamed of. And yeah, so I think it does make sense. It really does, and it's interesting how how I got here,
mm,
and how I think it's my sister Angel who guided me on this pathway to help others. And so, and that lights me up. I mean, it totally lights me up to know, and even in the mindfulness space now, to know that we are at Copper Beach, we're having this ripple effect, right? And so every person that we train in mindfulness will go out and talk about mindfulness to others, and it just keeps growing. And so, being able to be part of that is something that really fuels me.
Kim, when somebody such as yourself says you're certified in mental health first aid, what does that mean?
So I am a mental health first aider, but also what I am going to do, that actually is going to be my 2024 project, is I will also be certified to train people in mental health first aid. So I am right now a certified mental health. So it's kind of like how you're certified in first aid. This is you're certified in mental health first aid. What I want to do next is become a trainer so that I
Mhm.
can deliver it and disseminate it out to populations. I particularly want to focus in on youth because the earlier we start, just like, we train kids, early on in health class about first aid, I want to be able to train kids in mental health first aid, noticing the signs. How do you talk to someone who might be going through, a crisis? What are the resources or tools that are out there that people can access? So that's, it's kind of like that starting point for, getting
Mhm.
people that baseline level of knowledge. And I think that we need more and more of that. It just needs to become part of the curriculum that our kids are learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I've talked about it before where, in school we learned all information, knowledge, and regurgitated it in tests and quizzes and reports and presentations, but there was nothing. And I mean, we had gym class, which was about the physical, but there was nothing really about taking care of yourself. Even gym class wasn't even about taking care of yourself. It was how many push-ups can you do? How many pull-ups can you do? There's a minimum that we want you to pass this class, but there was nothing. I don't know. I graduated high school in 96, college in 2000, master's degrees like in the 2010s, but there was nothing really throughout all that education, all that time that had anything to do with um, how to treat yourself, how to survive, how to go through life. It was always like a one-off. There's something in the health center. There's this one seminar once a week or once a year. If you want to check it out, go check it out. But there was nothing about how to make it through life. There was nothing about these real world skills for yourself. So I love the fact that you say that you want to apply it to kids because as a father of three kids, I'm terrified. I'm terrified of the world that they're going to grow up in. It's a world that I don't even recognize because I didn't come up in that world. And I'm talking about the technology and everything that's evolving, all these tools that these kids are getting younger and younger. So I applaud your desired focus on that segment of the population because I think it's so important. And I don't know the ins and outs of what they are providing for kids. My kids are 8, 4, and like 16 or 17 months. I don't know the specifics of what my 8-year-old. I mean, it's great that I hear him some. I came around the corner and I found my kid. We were at a barbecue. I came around the corner and I found him wearing his Spider-Man gloves in his bathing suit, sitting Indian style with his hands like this. 4 years old. I think I found my oldest one time meditating as well. He was just sitting in a quiet room. And then I found, like I said, my 4-year-old at a barbecue. He just right in the middle of the deck. He's just sitting there. I come around the corner. He's got his eyes closed, hands on his knees, just relaxed. So you can tell they're doing stuff that I didn't do at all through my education. But again, I'm glad that you have that focus on the youth because I think they need it more than we do because we know enough. Hopefully, we're learning to look for resources
Yeah.
when they're kids. It's like unless you put it in front of them and say you should consider this, they're not going to know enough to really go out. For the most part, they're not going to know enough to go out and really seek it the way an adult would.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also very refreshing, even as an adult, but for kids as well, is that when we go to, regular doctors now, primary care, they're asking about mental health,
Mm, yeah, yeah.
which didn't happen before. And it's like, have you had any, have you wanted to hurt yourself or have you had these strange thoughts or, and it's like, oh, thank you for asking, And so there's that too, that's also happening. So, because you just never know. I had gone to a fifth grade classroom to talk about mental health and talk about my book. And I remember saying to the fifth graders, you need to find your safe person. It may not be your parents, it could be a teacher, a coach, an aunt, an uncle. that safe person that if you're feeling, tightness in your chest where you might be having a panic attack, or you're having these stomach aches all the time where you might be dealing with anxiety, or you just kind of don't feel right, find that safe person and talk to them. After I left that classroom, one of the fifth grade girls went up to the teacher and said, I'm having those feelings that Miss Pita talked about. And that teacher immediately called down to the school social worker and said, somebody needs to see this child. And to know, and so she reached out to me and told me that I had that impact on this child. And to know that I was able to impact that one girl, and who knows how many others, just by saying that
Yeah.
was like made me realize, like, okay, I want to help others get to that point where they're seeking the help that they need. And
Yeah.
so for me, that was really kind of that springboard. Yeah, that was back in 2019 when I had first published the book. And so to see that, that really gave me that desire to take this love your mental health piece into the world.
Yeah, and if you think about it, 2019 to now, think about where that child would have been without that heads up, without that guidance that you provided, where they may have been.
Right.
Because there still is that stigma. Even as a man, um, there still is that pressure of maintaining appearances. And what's great about this series, a byproduct of just the series itself, is just the ability of my guests and I opening up about challenges, vulnerabilities, anxieties, whatever it's been, mental health, obviously. Um, but yeah, it's just all it takes is just kind of like, it's almost like it's not permission, but even it's just a positive trigger, a positive question from somebody gives us permission just to open up. Because
Right.
most of the time we're the only ones holding ourselves back.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, and that's a good segue to the book, because and that, it's all about talking about, what our gifts are, and how do we unleash those and leverage our creativity.
Kim, before we jump to the book though, one last question before that.
Mm, sure.
What does leadership mean to you?
Oh, leadership means listening, guiding, and believing. And I say that with a lot of love in my heart. In order to be an effective leader, you need to understand the people that you're leading, and you need to understand where they're coming from. And I think that that starts with listening. And I think that it's not about imposing my ideas on others. It's about listening to see what somebody might need in that moment, whether it's, as a board chair, looking at, okay, what is our collective vision, and how are we going to integrate and implement that vision in what we do. So I think it's a very collaborative process. And I love being a leader. I really do. I love the feeling of accomplishment and watching others do great things. One of the things when I ran our ad agency, one of the things I learned early on was hire people better than yourself, because we are all like, we all have gifts. And, as a leader, you can't do everything, you can't be everything. So bring people on to, whether it's, in a hiring situation or on a board or whatever it is, bring others on who can do amazing things in their own right. And I learned that, early on, that we have to empower others to do great things and lead them along the way and help support them and guide them. But that's what it means to me.
So well said. Kim, at this point, why don't you introduce the book, and how you came across the book itself?
Sure, sure. So the book we're going to talk about is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Yeah, I got mine too.
All right.
which I absolutely adore. Who I absolutely adore. I mean, she's the Eat, Pray, Love author, and I think that so many people read that book or at least watched that movie. And yeah, so I was introduced to this book ironically when I moved to Old Saybrook, my Love Your Mental Health studio to Old Saybrook from Chester. I was in Chester for a year, Connecticut, and then moved to Old Saybrook. And the woman who had the art and wellness studio in the space that I now occupy, she was selling off some of her library, and she had this book, and I'm like, oh, I've been wanting to read this book so bad. And she goes, well, you can have it. And so she gave it to me. I took it home that night. I started pouring myself into it, and really fell in love with it because it just felt so true to who I am and
Mm,
what I believe about others. Just what I just said about leadership is that we all have our own magic that we need to deliver in this world, and if we don't, then somebody else is going to take that magic and deliver it into this world. So that's how I got. It was just like it was meant to be. Like I was meant to be in her space, and I think she was meant to. It was meant to be that she gave me this book, and it really has been very foundational for me on this journey.
Kim, can you give just kind of an overview of your takeaways of the book, I guess? And I'll just kind of the contents are broken down into, I think, 6 parts. Um, and again, all this has to do, Kim has broken it down in terms of the message of the book. Part one is courage, enchantment, permission, persistence, trust, divinity. Um, what are your takeaways from the book, Kim? Like, what is it that stands out? Why did this resonate? What was it that spoke to you?
First of all, those words that you just read are all just beautiful words, right? Courage, divinity, strength, and I think for me it was, just the notion of ideas, right? And so we all have ideas, and we all have ideas that might pop in our head or something we might do, but what stops us is fear, right? And kind of the same thing with the Love Your Mental Health, right? What stops us is fear. And so what I loved, if I can wrap my hands around this book, is it taught us how to get beyond that fear. First of all, to recognize those fears, whether it's like, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. What if people don't like this idea? And so to recognize those fears and realize what they truly are. They're just fears, and they're in our head. And so to be able to take those fears away, cast those aside, and realize that were given something. We all have a beautiful gift inside of us. And for us to be creative with that gift, whether it's playing music, being a singer, being an artist, being a writer, being a speaker, whatever it is that your gift is, to be able to put that out into the world. And I think that she did. She gave us permission. That was one of the other chapters, is permission to believe in yourself and to
Mm,
put forward the magic in your life. Um, she said one of the things is make something of yourself with yourself, was one of the things statements that she had. She said it unfolds a beauty and transcendence within your life. And I think that that really is what it's all about. Um, and that if we don't execute those ideas, they're going to go to someone else. She was giving like these real life examples of like this idea she had, and then all of a sudden like she didn't pursue the idea, and then like a year later somebody else ran with the idea. And so like you're trying to envision like, okay, do ideas hop from one person to the next person to the next person to the next person? I guess maybe, yeah, like maybe universally in this wonderful wide universe that can really
mm.
happen.
Yeah, it's an incredible book. It's one that was recommended to me by a few people when I started this series. Um, Somebody was on here as a guest and they recommended that book. So I got around to it. Um, they loved the book. They didn't get into the specifics of it. I think they gave the example of an idea floating around and you not listening to that voice, which a lot of my guests have talked about voices that were in their head for years about write a book or do this or do that, and they didn't listen. So my colleagues had recommended this book. I finally got around to it. I read the synopsis on it and just about creativity and inspiration. And obviously she's a successful writer. Um, but there's just so much in it. What's powerful is, yes, that permission. I think it's a wake-up call. I think everybody should read it. I don't care what kind of industry you're in. Um, excuse me, what kind of industry you're in, painter, writer, sculptor, like the traditionally creative types, sure, fine, perfect. But I think other people that aren't in those areas should also read it just because it wakes you up to listen to yourself. It wakes you up
Yeah.
to listen to what inspires you, what you could put out there. I think so many people walk through life thinking that they don't have anything to offer. And I
Yeah.
think the pandemic woke me up. Not that I felt like that before, but I think the pandemic really woke me up to what I truly have to offer. And I'm still working on it, still a work in progress. But I think a lot of that plays into this as well. Like everything I just said is not pulled from what she said, but from my own experience. She translates that experience perfectly into this book in terms of
Yeah.
knowing who you are, not compromising, that it doesn't have to work for other people, that you should be fulfilled. Uh, what was the idea that I was just thinking about? But again, even if you're not a creative, I think a lot of people compromise thinking that they don't have anything to offer. And I think that's where a lot of people get lost in their lives is that they don't we think about reacting to the world around us instead of being proactive in bringing to that world. And I'll go through a couple quotes that I found in the book that stood out to me. I got this thing marked up as I was going through it in the margins. It's just like good quote,
Yeah.
or so I went through it again and wrote down some of the quotes. But what for you changed after you read this book, Kim? What thinking tweaked, or what view or what lens of yours changed just by reading this book? Was anything enhanced or altered? How did you come out of this book different?
Yeah, I think belief in myself, right? And I think that we get stuck. We just get stuck. And she said something about Eat, Pray, Love. She said, "I found an untended idea and I ran away with it." Right? And then it became this international bestseller. And I think about like even what you're doing, right? This book leads. Like like when you first approached me, I'm like, what a great idea, And then as I got more involved and kind of researched you, and I'm like, talk about running away with an idea and creating something beautiful, right? And I'm sure it was an idea that came to you, but it might have taken time to kind of pull it all together and like, all right, how am I going to do this? Who am I going to talk to? How do I get the equipment? What systems do I need? All of that. But you have the courage and the belief in yourself to take it to this next level where you have this, wonderful podcast and having all these great guests on it. So it's an idea that starts, an unintended idea. It's not like, you probably like all of a sudden, I don't know how it started. Maybe we should talk about that, but it is something that is very beautiful, right? It just starts as this like seed, and then you start to nurture it, right, and cultivate it, and then it starts to grow and become this amazing thing. And it's even with writing, right? It's like you sit back and you might like one night. I'm a big nighttime writer, right? So I'll write at night, and then the next morning I'll go back and I'll be like, wow, I wrote that. Like how did I even do that? But it's like sometimes we need to just let our ideas flow. And I think that if we become so enamored with the minutia of it and the execution of it that we get scared and then we back away. So I think that for me, the whole notion of belief in yourself and that it can be done. And if it's meant to be done, it will be done. If you put it out into the universe somehow, some way, by faith or whatever, it will happen. So I think that for me, it just kind of gave me that belief that, I can do this. I can make this happen.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you said so many great things just there. Um, but I mean, in terms of this series, there's one, I'm just looking at the page of like quotes that I pulled. One that really stands out when I read this. She says, creativity is a gift to the creator, not just a gift to the audience. So when you talk about how did this series start, um, it was me taking a chance, right? Not even at the beginning of the series itself. Long story short, because I've told this story before, the pandemic hit. I wanted to stay active, joined the board. I hosted their virtual events. I just volunteered. I'm like, what the hell? Let me do it. I enjoyed it. They said it that I looked like I enjoyed it, was done with that board, and wanted to kind of keep that energy of like picking people's brains, having a good laugh, being relaxed. And obviously, this dives deeper than an association's event because those are more like high level questions. This is deeper. Nonetheless, I'm like, okay, I want to start this up. Obviously, it puts my face out there. We're not going to lie, it's my business, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
But it's evolved. It's evolved. Like the way that it started is not what it is now. And I was talking to a guest where he said he wanted to start a podcast, but there's so many out there. So, and it'll be hard to compete. And me, I don't even think about it that way.
Mm,
I started in terms of I missed talking to somebody and sharing that conversation. But again, this quote, creativity is a gift to the creator. Like this is a gift to me. Like these conversations, talking to all of you across different industries, from different backgrounds, from different experiences. Um, so even if no one was listening, this is already a reward to me. The fact that people listen and write me and provide feedback, and I've had like authors that I have up here reach out to be on, like that's insane. But
yeah.
it's mine first. Like I have to enjoy it first. It is for my audience, it is for my guests. But if I don't feel that gift first, then it no longer works for me. And with getting busy with work and growing the family, there are certain things that are falling by the wayside. Things that they don't drive me enough, they don't fulfill me enough. So it's kind of like I keep this pecking order of what is it that really is a gift to me, and what is, yes, a gift, but I don't feel that fire for it. So it's amazing how making sure something you're creating, again, whether you're a painter, a sculptor, a writer, um, a construction worker, an accountant, a conversationalist. Like to me, conversational conversations are creativity. This has made me better, even when I'm in public with somebody that I'm meeting for the first time. I see, like when you ask somebody a certain question, how they come alive. You see their
Mm,
brilliance come out because you're looking them in the eye, you're using their name, you're asking them about themselves. And it's not just like, how's your day going? But it's like the why, like, why are you who you are? Why did you do that? Like curiosity. So to me, that stands out, that we need to recognize that creativity, it should light us up. It's not just for others to buy or to appreciate. It has to be something that really brings out an energy from you.
yeah, yeah. I love everything you just said, and kind of, dovetailing on that curiosity piece. I think that's what it's all about, right? And I've always been curious. I've started as a writer, a storyteller, asking questions, went into journalism because I wanted to ask a lot of questions, and I think that we need to do that. I think that human beings are just amazing creatures, and that if we give people a chance and we ask the right questions and know how to ask the right questions, I mean, you can learn so much about a person. And I think that, curiosity sparks imagination, right? And so imagination sparks creativity. And it's kind of like this whole, beautiful package that, each one of us, I mean, you think about it like when you go on a first date, right? You're asking all these questions because you're curious, what makes that person tick and, what makes them special. And I think that if we keep doing that instead of just getting stuck in, kind of like the status quo, imagine how much more we can learn about people. What I also love too about what you're doing is that so many people don't read. And so many people, and I find that all the time, like, I'm like, oh, well, I'll read the book for you and I'll tell you what it's about. Like, because, like, I love to read. I love to dissect books. I love to, like, synopsize books. And I think what you're doing is you're bringing a book to life. You're bringing those words to life, those words of wisdom that somebody sat down and did. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. She talks about in the book how this poet, just literally like locked himself into his home so that he could create this beautiful work. In a sense, that was his sacrifice, but also it was what he was meant to do. And he shares these beautiful words with people that inspire them or drive them or motivate them or whatever it is that his words do. And I think of like people like Stephen King, who has been doing that for years. He locks himself in his cabin in Maine and then creates these beautiful stories that you're like, how did they even come up with those ideas? But he was meant to do that. Or somebody like an Adam Sandler who's hysterical. I mean, he's just that guy that you just want to be around because he's funny and real and authentic. And I think that you know once we find our authentic true self, then we can really deliver our magic. And I think that
Absolutely.
that is what she really helped me to realize. And she started with Eat, Pray, Love, right? And so she had to find her authentic self during that. And then to be able to follow it up with this book that really, like you said, everyone should read it. Whatever profession, I think teenagers should read it. It's easy, it's quick, it's an easy read. It's not difficult. So
Yeah,
there's
she's
that
got a
too.
great writing style, very, very accessible, very down to earth, very funny.
Yeah.
Um, Kim, what I did want to pick your brain on, um, first is let me read this paragraph. It's a bit long, but I think it's one of the ones that stood out to me. And let me see if I can find. I don't know if I can easily find which section it falls under. Um, it may be persistence that it falls under. Yeah, I think it's persistence. But in any case, let me just read this, and I want to get your take. She says, I firmly believe that we all need to find something to do in our lives that stops us from eating the couch. Whether we make a profession out of it or not, we all need an activity that is beyond the mundane and that takes us out of our established and limiting roles in society. Examples: mother, employee, neighbor, brother, boss, etc. We all need something that helps us to forget ourselves for a while, to momentarily forget our age, our gender, our socioeconomic background, our duties, our failures, and all that we have lost and screwed up. We need something that takes us so far out of ourselves that we forget to eat, forget to pee, forget to mow the lawn, forget to resent our enemies, forget to brood over our insecurities. Prayer can do that for us. Community service can do it. Sex can do it. Exercise can do it. And substance abuse most certainly do it, albeit with god awful consequences. But creative living can do it too. Perhaps creativity's greatest mercy is this: by completely absorbing our attention for a short and magical spell, it can relieve us temporarily from the dreadful burden of being who we are. Best of all, at the end of your creative adventure, you have a souvenir, something that you made, something to remind you forever of your brief but transformative encounter with inspiration. Now, I'm curious in terms of overall that speaks to kind of like a relief that you feel when you get, for me it's like anxiety, and I've dealt with anxiety all my life, and it kicked up during the pandemic for seemingly obvious reasons, right? Father, young family, uncertainty in
Mm,
society. For me, that anxiety has been, and I've learned to channel it into different things that I need at any given moment, intellectually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it may be. I get curious and I just go. I'm curious, how do you tie creativity in? Because this kind of seems like to seek a relief from ourselves, right?
mm.
Everyday life, creativity. What is your thing? How do you tie in mental health and creativity? You, as somebody who's dealt with mental health in your life, you're working in the space, you're a creative, you've been a storyteller, you've been a writer. Like, what words do you describe? How do you tie those two in, mental health and creativity? What have you seen? What have you experienced?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and I love that paragraph that you just read. I think it's so powerful, and I had mentioned earlier that I just got through the last bout of COVID, and and I found myself really depressed. I was isolating, I was by myself. I was like, and I could feel myself just spiraling, getting weepy, oh, woe is me, and then I said, all right, stop, you got to stop, use some of your own advice, right? Sometimes that it's like, you gotta get you out of your own way, right? Use some of your own advice. And that's when I said, all right, I've got to get creative. I've got to, move myself from that TV that I'm getting sucked into, get off that couch, change my seat, change my setting, change my viewpoint so that I can really rebuild myself back up. And I actually latched onto this book of by Jay Shetty called The Nine Rules of Love. And so I really dove into that and really started to, absorb it. And I think for me, it was like getting out of my own head. Um, how I use creativity, like I'll give you an example of when I fly on an airplane. Okay. One of the things for me of flying on an airplane is I get very panicky. I find that I get tensed up. I have restless leg syndrome. So for me, being squished into that little seat is very difficult for me. So what I do is I bring a little coloring book with coloring pencils. And instead of focusing on all of these things that I know that are going to happen to my body because I'm sitting there, I'm now focused on drawing between the lines and colors. And one of the things that I talk about is the joy of creative wellness. I actually have a workshop on that, and it talks about the 9 ways to integrate creativity into your life. And it's even as much as wearing a colorful shirt, you know, getting the black and gray and blue off and wearing something red and bright and something that's going to enliven you. Eating foods that are rich in color. Um, looking at, one of the things that I've been doing, I've been watching a lot of flea market flip. So one of the things I've been doing is repurposing my furniture with color, painting things, just bringing color into your life because color is all about our senses and the five senses. And the other book that I've been reading or I just read is, it's behind me, Life in Five Senses by Gretchen Rubin, who's the woman who does the Happiness Project.
Okay.
And so when you start to look at your senses and how do you see, smell, taste, hear, that's all about bringing creativity into your life because you're using your full senses. So I think that there's so many things that we can do that we take for granted or that we're like, oh, well, that's not going to help. Yeah, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
When you deal with somebody who has Alzheimer's, getting them in touch with their creative self again is something that's very empowering because they recognize colors, they can feel the textures. Their brain may not be functioning fully to the fullest capacity, but they still can gravitate to the things that we loved as a kid, right? And so a lot of times it's getting back to your childhood, right? When you didn't know a lot and it was all about color, taste, touch, smell, all of that creativity. So, so I think that's how you integrate that creative wellness into your life.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned childhood because childhood comes up on here all the time. And then I have a few guests that have talked about their work in the happiness space, in the laughter space, going back to their childhoods and really, really appreciating the wonder and making sure that our kids understand the wonder that they have. So it's funny you bring up kids. It's about awe and wonder. And then she has something in the book that talks about wonder. Let's see, page 250 is a good segue. Good call. Um, she's speaking to like when things don't work out. Um, she talks about returning to, okay, at such times I can always steady my life once more by returning to my soul. And this is on page 250, Kim. At such times, I can always steady my life once more by returning to my soul. I ask it, and what is it you want, dear one? The answer is always the same: more wonder, please.
Mm,
As long as I'm still moving in that direction toward wonder, then I know I will always be fine in my soul, which is where it counts. And since creativity is still the most effective way for me to access wonder, I choose it. And I bring that up only because I've brought up on here previously less stress in my life because I'm not moving, I'm not working towards a goal, like a strictly defined goal. I may have general goals. I want to move, like she says, in that general direction. But for the most part, I'm being creative in my everyday. I'm building moments. There's a quote somewhere about moments, or maybe I'm applying it to moments, but it's like the power of conversations throughout the day, meeting new people, trying new things. She in that other quote she talked about trying new things. We've talked about trying new things that we're not familiar with. So there's a power in just wonder, like you said, that
yeah,
that awe that a child has, that rediscovery of wonder in life. But yeah, I've realized just this put to language what I was thinking about. What is it that's really keeping me going in life? It's not that strict goal at the end, but it's just that wonder, that ability to create awesome things in your
yeah, the
everyday.
curiosity. It's the
Yeah,
curiosity.
yeah.
It's having that curiosity every day in life. And I think that 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 dovetails so nicely with mindfulness because when we're truly present, when we're truly present in that moment, whether it's going for a walk or driving your car or doing the dishes or eating, right? Eating, when we eat mindfully, we're paying attention to what we're eating. We're looking at the colors. We're wondering where it came from. We're expressing gratitude for those farmers that may have grown that strawberry, and so that really is truly the epitome of mindfulness, is to be truly present and being okay with that wondering and being okay with that curiosity and being grateful for it, right?
Mhm.
And that's a beautiful thing. And people say, oh, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Yeah,
Well,
you do.
I was thinking of what the alternative, our default mode is, as opposed to what you're talking about. What is that? What is it that we do when we're not being mindful? And it's just, you're on cruise control. You're just reacting.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
doing the dishes, but I'm looking out the window, daydreaming of something, or thinking about the stress tomorrow at work or what I messed up, the day before. You're not. I don't know. It's come up so often in in these conversations about just appreciating the little things. Um,
yes, yes.
and it's like
I think it
I'm
happens.
trying to think of a way to like convey that to somebody so that they won't think it's hokey.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Because they
yeah.
say here we go with another fucking cliche, but it's very important to just stop and take in where you are. Like even in this room that I'm
Yeah,
in right now, I can look around at all the stuff I have in here and find a great story and a piece of whatever, a book, something that my kid drew me, Well, there's a lot of books in here, but and just think about the history of everything that came into this room. But I
Yeah.
don't, for the most part, I come in, I sit down, I work, I get up, I go. Like,
Yeah.
so there is something just to stopping and taking in where you are and just appreciating it.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom was like, "Oh, I don't know about this whole mindfulness thing." She's like, "I'm always talking about it. I don't understand this, what you're talking about, and I get it, it's
Yeah,
generational,
oh yeah.
and they didn't grow up with it. It's not, this big thing, or they might, like, oh yeah, it's those people that do the yoga or those people that do, go sit in the, wherever and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
meditate. And it's like, no, 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 mom. It's so much more than that. So much. She came to a session, a workshop that I had, a wellness. I do wellness beach retreats here in Old Saybrook, and she came, and her mindset totally did a 180. And after the wellness retreat, she called me and she's like, yeah, those things that I didn't really want to do because I was scared, or because I didn't think, or because I didn't want to leave my house because I didn't want to leave the plants. I changed my mind. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah. She's like, your wellness retreat really got me thinking that life is too short and I need to really kind of change my tune. And I was like, yes, yes, I changed my
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah. I talk to my father-in-law all the time. He's recently retired, he and my mother-in-law, and um he worked for a landscaping company. He owned a landscaping company himself. So he was always active. He would work full time and then go home and cut like three different lawns or four different lawns, whatever, during the summer, all throughout the summer. Recently retired, and it's one of those things where he just can't quit cold turkey. And I'm
Yep.
seeing more and more people retire, and they're coming back as retirees that are helping their companies. They're staying active. Where like back in the day, it was like you retired and then you just kind of sat around the house watching Price is Right and soap operas. You had your income to sustain the house and everything that needed to be done, but it was almost like you worked all your life for somebody else and now you were just kind of in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Where now it's
Yeah.
just different. Now, again, it's more proactive. You realize the power of creativity, getting out there, getting activated, getting motivated, getting proactive. And again, that same lesson with the young girl in the class that you gave like a half hour ago to now with your mom. All it takes is like somebody to introduce it to you, because you may have a perception of it from a distance. Oh, these hippies or whatever, whatever they're thinking, and all you need is the right introduction to it. Not somebody that's going to say you should work out more. No,
Right.
but like they show you why you should. They demonstrate why you should. They give you the why of why you should. So that's amazing that she discovered that. Obviously a generational thing. That was the generation that you retired and you kind of, yeah, just waited around. So
Yeah,
kudos to you.
yeah, and it's like your plants, you should be traveling. Like, she has this opportunity to go to Italy, and I'm like, just go. What are you
Yeah.
waiting here for? And it's like, her mindset is switched. It's like, I'll take care of your plants. You can buy new plants. So and I think that that's why I'm here on this earth, right? Is to help people get out of their own way, help people
Mm,
get unstuck, right?
yeah.
And I think that you have to release your triggers, you have to release your fears, and you have to believe that, number one, it's most important to love yourself. And then number two, to share that love with others. One of my favorite thing is, the key to happiness is to love and be loved. And that's my statement on my Facebook page. It has been part of my existence. I mean, I have a shirt with a heart on it. My logo is love. And I think that is so important. We need more love in our life. We
Mm,
really do, because you know why? This world is a mess,
it is.
and the more we can love our circle and our, those circles around us, the better we're all going to be. And I think more than ever we need that, and I think it's really important moving forward.
Absolutely. Kim, can you just very briefly, because I've taken up enough of your time, but your memoir, can you just kind of give a synopsis of your memoir?
Yeah, so it took me about 8 to 9 years to complete, and I started it after my sister had passed away. And I really wanted to tell our story about what we went through. Uh, with her mental health journey and how it started, how we found her. She died in Arizona in her apartment. So I start with that, and kind of going into her apartment for the first time after she had passed away. And then it takes people on this journey of how we dealt with mental health and the things that we saw, experienced. And then it talks about how I was able to take that loss, that extreme loss, and turn it into something positive. And that was my road towards becoming a mental health advocate. I kind of want to do a part two because my life has changed so much since I wrote that and finished it in 2019, and I've had some really good ideas of kind of where I want to take it. So it's a journey about us, my sister and I, Kelly, and talks a lot about who she was as a person. I wanted people to remember her for the good things she brought to this world. And yeah, and so it's kind of my story, and I'm looking forward to adding on to it because I've done so much since I've written the book. I mean, I didn't have mindfulness back then, and now I'm like I'm a whole different human, and
Yeah.
it's really nice to see where I kind of landed.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get to that point where you feel like a whole different human, but all you did was take time to just discover yourself a little more.
Right?
Like
And it's
you feel like
free.
a whole different human, but there's nothing new to you. You just learn tools to let yourself be, let yourself shine, let yourself see
Yeah.
yourself. It's just that's the most frustrating part, I think, in life is by the time you feel comfortable in your own skin, you're doing your best because you finally feel comfortable in your own skin, and you've made that discovery about who you are.
Yeah, and you honor yourself, right? And I think that's why the self-care piece is so important is, especially moms, right? And not to discount dads, but a lot of moms are like, all about the kids, 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 and I was like that too for so long. And it was like, you're giving so much of yourself to everyone else that the person that gets most forgotten is you. And then you realize, and then you're resentful for it, and you're feeling exhausted and drained, and then you realize I should have been taking care of myself this whole time. And so I think that there's the beauty about in your 50s and 60s where, kind of that family piece is, they're kind of on their own now. And so it's like now that central focus comes back to you. And sometimes I wish I had known that earlier in life, but that's okay. That's why I'm here sharing messages with others. Is that you have to take that time for self-care. I mean, people that come to my wellness retreats, it's the first thing they've done for themselves in years. Like
Yeah.
they've never given themselves a full day of self-care, and it's like, why? Why
Yeah.
not?
I think that's another silver lining of the pandemic. There are very few, but I think that's another good one is I've seen and heard from parents or fathers and mothers separately where they kind of give each other a day to go with their friends and go off and decompress. My wife and I do that the same thing. It's like everybody
Yeah,
needs it. We're
we
back in the
need it.
past. My parents' generation, you'd never hear about my dad going off for the day or my mom going off for the day. It was like they were both home. It was both their duties to be there all throughout. Now with the mental health aspect coming to the forefront, that's a part of it. I mean, it's there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm glad that that's shifting as well for parents and mothers as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I
Um,
was running the ad agency with my ex-husband, he would, there would be times when he would just get like really frazzled, and I'd be like, I think you need to go away to the Norwich Inn and Spa for a day. And so I always knew once he got to that point of no return, it was time to send him away for a day or two. And he'd
Yeah.
come back so
Yeah.
rejuvenated and so refreshed and so ready to tackle whatever, fire we had to put out or whatever was ahead. And I think that if we grant ourselves that time, we can be so much more stable.
Yeah. Um, Kim, so how would you, in a few sentences, how would you try to sell this to somebody, especially if they don't believe? Let me try to make it work on screen. She's making it hard for me with her cover design. How would you, there you go. How would you, especially to somebody who doesn't see themselves as a creative? Again, I'm going to say you don't need to be to appreciate and glean great insights from this book. What would you say to somebody to kind of make them pick up this book for themselves?
I would say that, everyone needs a little magic in their lives. And when you believe that we all have the talent and magic inside of us, when you see it written in this way, this is a tool to add to your toolbox. This is something that will give you the strength and the courage and the permission to believe in yourself. And and to realize that we all have creativity. Even an accountant has creativity. They have to be creative with numbers. A firefighter has creativity. They have to be creative with how they spray that water, how they cut through a burning wall. They have to be creative in their delivery. So no matter what people say, I don't have a creative bone in my body. Bull. Yeah, you do. We all have creativity because creativity is sparked by curiosity. And if we are curious and we learn how to do things that need to be done, we are putting our creativity into action. And so that would be how I would, and I would also say, it was written by the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and I think that in and of itself is a selling point, and it's life changing. I think it was a really life changing book and very foundational for me as far as getting me to that next place in where I am in my life now.
Yeah, yeah. I think because she's been through it, she kind of blazes a path for others to follow. She kind of knows the ways you may be holding yourself back and how to offset that. So it's almost like step by step of like the not the creative process for what you're doing specifically, but just your mindset of how you see yourself, how you find inspiration, how you get it out there, how you sustain it. So I echo Kim's words. Definitely recommend the book. Kim, in wrapping up, is there anything that I might have missed? What are you up to these days? Anything that you want to share?
What I'm up to now is a lot of work with Copper Beach. I'm doing every Tuesday at 12:30. I am doing a free meditation online via Zoom through Copper Beach. It's a half-hour meditation, and so if people want to dial in, they can be part of it. And I will lead a guided meditation on Tuesdays at 12:30. So for me, I think that's really important to give people that time to just pause for a minute in their busy days and just really kind of become present with themselves so that they can finish off the day in a good frame of mind. So that for me is what I'm focused in on. And like I said, really just growing this Love Your Mental Health brand and getting people to realize that self-care is key in how we love ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's key to your meditation, your midday meditation, just to break up the day, step away, and just kind of recharge, even if just for a little bit, instead of just trying to burn right through it 8 hours straight or whatever. So I think that's great.
Yeah. And then I
So
think that's, meditation, you can meditate on ideas, right? So if you have an idea, as they say in the big magic, right, is we all have ideas. If there's an idea that you want to bring to the forefront, you can meditate on that idea. Take that time to be really present with that idea and sit with it and think about it. And, And that's when the magic happens, right? The magic, it becomes something that you can deliver to the world. So
Yeah, I think with ideas, people just think it's going to come to them fully formed, and that if it hasn't come to them fully formed, then it's not worth pursuing. But there's a little nudge that you need about jumping into that idea, that outline of an idea, that skeleton frame of an idea, and kind of filling in what you can. But again, there's that proactivity that you need.
yeah, yeah, you're a living example of it with this podcast.
I appreciate that. So Kim and I talked about Big Magic: Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. Great book. Highly recommend it. I can't stress it enough. Even if you're not an artist, even if you're not a creative, you don't think yourself a creative, the mindset aspect of this is, it's not research laden where it's like technical jargon. It's like everyday talk, conversation that you would have with somebody you trust next to you. So I highly recommend it. Kim, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, John. This was wonderful. It was so nice to spend some time with you today.
It was awesome. If there's anything that I might have missed, there's so much to cover, limited time. Please let me know. I'll reach out to Kim and see if I can get some feedback or ideas on anything that I get. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.
Peace.